And welcome along to the Inner Huddle Series 2. I am joined, as always, by my friend and legend, Geoff Bonner from Wessex Futsal Club. And today we have a special guest, previous guest of 2 times, Betsy Tuffrey. How are we all doing?
Yeah, good, Pez. Really good to be back. It's been a long time and it's great to be back with Betsy.
How you doing, Betsy?
I'm good. Pleasure to be on as a returning guest. It's been a while, but nice to see you both. Nice to be here in person.
And as always, we've had a few technical issues. wouldn't be the same, would it, Geoff, without a few technical issues? So we're sharing the microphone. So hopefully it'll all end up all right once we play it back. But who knows? As always, the format is going to be, we have got sort of 10 to 12 questions here that have been sent in to us by people via social media, etc., and text and whatnot, and we are going to try our best to add some value to them, and that's why you're here, Betsy, really. So you're going to be our sort of resident sports psychologist going forward, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully we've got many good ones to come.
And also a little bit different for this series is we're going to have a couple of sponsors involved, and the first sponsor I've written here is Seed Psychology, which fits in really well, Betsy, because that's you. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Seed Psychology is my company. I'll do private consultancy with a number of different sports and athletes through that. So anyone that wants to know more about that or get involved in having a chat with me, then yeah, Seed Psychology is the place to go.
Great. Well, we'll put all the links and details and that in the show notes. That sounds really professional, doesn't it, Geoff? Right. So, Geoff, where have we been for the last two and a half years? You got married.
Yeah, this year.
I moved house.
Yeah.
We were recovering from the pandemic and getting all our weekly sessions and things back up and running. So that's why there's been a big... I've written a book. Oh, Betsy, you've written a book, I saw, as well.
Well, I contributed a chapter to a book.
Oh, okay.
So less glamorous than your...
Well, at least yours is out, mine's not. But we'll get to that because it's one of the questions shortly. So how's married life, Geoff?
It's very good, actually. Yes, Pez. Thank you.
I'd been about a month.
Did you enjoy the wedding?
The bits I can remember of your wedding, Geoff, I enjoyed very, very much. Thank you.
And we just found out Betsy's got a new puppy as well.
Yes. So new member of the clan, keeping me on my toes.
Brilliant. So we're all good and we're all happy. So let's see if we can add some value to some of these questions. I have written a few notes. Jeffrey won't have done, but you've got them in front of you on your phone, haven't you?
Yeah.
And you've got some there as well. All good. Right. Shall we just crack straight in then?
Yeah, let's do it.
Right. Question number 1, and I think this one's actually for me really, but it's how's the book coming along and what's the hardest chapter you've written in the book? The book is finished, which is great, but it's been finished for quite some time. Had I realised that dealing with literary agents and publishers was as difficult as dealing with football managers and football agents, then I might have gone a different route with it, but it's been very tricky. It is finished, but I think I'm probably going to go down the self-publishing route with it eventually, but that takes a lot of time, but that's where we're at with it. Hardest chapter, I had a little think about that last night, and it was the children's rights chapter. So there's probably the longest chapter as well on the rights of children and their right to play football for whatever reason they want to. So some want to be professionals and some just want to come and hang out with their friends. Some want to spin around and pick daisies and things, and the conflicts that can have between the different wants of the parents and the coaches and the parents of the other children in the team. So it was really quite a complicated chapter and one that I wanted to get right. So look out for that one. Cool. That was all about me, wasn't it? Didn't really want to go straight into that. I need your help, Geoff. Right. Question number 2. I saw a Facebook post you put out about intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. Can you explain more? And this was a post that I put out a little while ago. Again, it was something to do with the book. But, Betsy, it might be time to bring you in really on intrinsic and extrinsic motivators.
Yeah, that sounds my domain.
It does, doesn't it? Phew.
Yeah, so intrinsic motivation essentially is motivation from within the self. So, for example, playing sport or doing an activity because you feel enjoyment or pride or a sense of achievement yourself. Extrinsic motivation is more about something external to you that's a motivator, I guess. So whether that's reward, for some footballers, potentially financial reward, sort of respect or almost that pride someone else feels in you, so an external, something external to yourself really. And I was thinking about this morning when I was going through the questions, and there's a nice link there between intrinsic motivation and autonomy, which is kind of how when we have choice and we kind of back our own behaviours, we engage in our behaviours because we want to. Whereas the opposite to that would be like feeling compelled or controlled to do something, which I'm sure you guys have seen that in young players. Can you see that they are wanting to participate for their own joy, their own sense of achievement, their own enjoyment of the sport, or whether they're doing it because they are compelled by something or someone else, or they're striving to be a footballer for monetary reasons, etc. And there's not really a lot of sports psychology literature would say that intrinsic motivation is more valuable, more sustainable, better essentially. I think just as long as you understand where your motivations come from is the most important thing. I've worked with young footballers who are really motivated by monetary reasons because perhaps they come from a really underprivileged background, and that's for no one to say that's a bad reason. So yeah, I guess that's my initial take. I don't know if you've got any comments to add on that.
Yeah, I mean the financial side doesn't come into probably a little bit older, does it? Sort of, I deal with children from sort of reception year to school year 6, and you're sort of school year 5 and above, right up to adults, aren't you? So that might come in a little bit later. But intrinsic, for the ones I see a lot of the kids are motivated by actually wanting to improve and learn new skills, but they might be motivated just by making new friends. And like you've just said, any intrinsic reason is correct because it's their own personal reasons for doing it, so you can't sort of judge it. It's more the extrinsic ones that I worry about, sort of rewards from parents or trying to make parents happy, or because dad might have played or mum might have played, and if I play well I might get McDonald's or I might get some extra pocket money, and it's those kind of external motivators that we've come across, Geoff, that anything that affects someone's decision making. So if a kid's maybe getting £1 a goal, which happens quite a lot, or £5 a goal I've seen, and even more, then it affects a child's decision making on the pitch, which affects their development because they're going to be greedier and they're going to shoot from all angles, and even the extrinsic motivator of doing it just for the love of your parents, it can become really complicated and horrible. Some children only feel valued when they've played well, or they've scored, or they've won something, and the love of their parents gets sort of entangled with their activity, which can be quite nasty, can't it, Geoff?
Yeah, this is the sort of thing we'll have a phone conversation for about an hour when we've called each other up about something completely different, isn't it? And it's, for me, it quite nicely links to that first question where you said your hardest chapter was around children's rights.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm putting words in your mouth, but did you conclude that there's not really a right or wrong reason, a bit like what Betsy had just explained, for why someone's at Pez's street soccer sessions, as long as they're there and they're happy and they're safe and they're enjoying it?
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's one child who wants to be a professional footballer has got every right to have that dream, going back to children's rights, whereas a child who's just turned up because his mate goes, he's got every right to be there as well, but that can cause conflicts within a team because there's lots of different motivators.
And it's interesting because when I think about my season with Wessex Futsal Club, we asked all the players why they were there at the start of the season, and I probably should have done it individually and on a feedback form that was more anonymous, but we did it as a group purely because of time constraints and how much time we actually get with the players and away from training sessions. And I thought we would get more extrinsic things coming out. We'd just been promoted to Tier 1, so games would be live on BT Sport, and showpiece events with lots of people watching from home, and if it's not live on BT Sport, it's live streamed on YouTube. And I thought we'd get all these answers, and it was more, I'm here because I want to be challenged, and the things that I kind of wanted to hear. And we had a list on the whiteboard that we wrote at training, and we put them either side if they're intrinsic or extrinsic. And I think the people that didn't put their hands up and give an answer probably knew they were there for an Instagram post, an extrinsic reward, and that thing that we've talked about a lot in the past, those feel-good factors that are short and not long-term. And I'd have a guess that the players that were there at the start of the season for those reasons aren't there with us now at the end of the season, after it's been a really long, tough, hard slog where we've won one game at home in Tier 1 and got one draw away.
It's not so many instant rewards there, are there?
No, and you've got to keep showing up, and we've been saying all season, a winner's just a loser who keeps turning up, and that's been our mantra, if you like.
What I've noticed is, though, you've developed a great team spirit there because of that adversity.
Yeah.
So you might have lost a few of the ones that are there for a bit of the glory and the BT sports and all that kind of stuff, and developed a really core group of wonderful lads, really, aren't they?
Yeah,
great group.
I think what you can, just to add on to that, I think what you can see probably in children of younger ages as well is how you can use initially what might seem like an extrinsic source of motivation to maybe dig a bit deeper. So for a really young footballer, it might be they want that medal, or they want that physical reward from a tournament or a game, and that's an extrinsic motivator. And then it's kind of tapping into that, okay, well, how would you feel if you got that victory, and almost allow them to see, I would really enjoy that, and actually it wouldn't matter if I didn't get that medal, although that's what I'm striving for. So you can kind of play across the two.
Yeah, and I think from a coach's point of view and parents, it's then explaining to the child that that's an outcome, and to get to that outcome there's a process, and then you explain what the process looks like, and you have to do all the controllable things, and some things are outside of your control, and you might not get the outcome, but you've still done everything you can to strive towards it. And that's a big part of what we do. Right, shall we move on to question 3?
Yeah.
Happy? Cool. Right, I've got my glasses on. Question 3. My child is junior school age and plays for a local team in the Junior Premier League. We're informed by text on a Friday if he's been selected to play in the team at the weekend. He gets real anxiety about being selected, to the point where he even has to sleep in our bed on the Thursday evening. We like the team, but we're worried about the impact it's having on his mental health. Do you have any thoughts or advice that can help? I might just bat this one straight over to you, Betsy, because this might be a bit more up your street.
You caught me off guard there, and you said Betsy and you were looking at Geoff, so I thought
it's this sharing microphone thing, it's really throwing me.
So yeah, when I read this through, I think the first thing I'd say is let's not firstly assume why he's feeling anxious, because it's easy to look at that question and think, and I don't know who's written that and what the maybe preconceived ideas of that might be. It's easy to think, that child is maybe anxious about being selected and playing, but it might be that child is anxious about not knowing what he's doing in that game, whether he's selected or not. It might just be that. It might be that he's actually indifferent about whether he plays or not. It's that anxiety about getting the text or being informed and not knowing what his plans are. It could be that. It could be that sense of, I'm anxious because I'm anxious about playing if I'm selected, or it's really, really important to me to get selected. Or it might be actually, I'm anxious about failing and not being selected potentially. So I think the first thing I'd say is let's not assume why he might be feeling that way. And that's easier said than done for parents listening, to try and get to that information. But I think that would be the first goal. Okay, can we understand better what's the anxiety about specifically? But I think in terms of advice, it's maybe asking a few more questions about how he feels when he is playing, or what is it like for him when he's selected? How important is that? And maybe getting a bit of conversation out there first. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced players that you've coached that feel that sense of anxiety at being selected, not being selected, or how you felt in terms of delivering that selection news.
Yeah, it's different for me because when I've run teams, I've always had the rule that everyone gets equal playing time. So I've never had to tell a child that they're not selected to play. Not start a game, yes, but then we sort of always rotated it around to make it fair. So it's not something I've had first-hand experience of, other than I've had to coach a lot of children at the soccer school who are in teams that this happens. And I don't like it. I always think if my child was getting anxiety because of something that was happening at school, I would really look to find out why and try and get it sorted. Whereas in football, it seems to be accepted a little bit more, maybe. That, oh, that's the way it is. The texts go out on a Friday, we'll deal with it. Whereas if it was something to do with school, if a teacher was giving my child anxiety at school or a certain lesson, then I'd be asking for a meeting and speaking to the teacher, head of year maybe, and the child himself to find out, to get to the bottom of it. Whereas at football, we seem to just sort of gloss over it a little bit and say, well, that's how it is. Either you're selected or you're not. I don't know what you think, Geoff.
There's a few things that I do with even the senior team that's, everything we do is...
So men's team.
Yes, is performance-based, outcome-based. So we've got a WhatsApp group, but I don't ever put the team squad in there. I message that all individually because I think those conversations should be private. And I don't know what you think of this, Betsy, but it's almost a little bit like an adult's doing what they know from when they were playing as a player, and that's, they just got told you're not on the team, and as an adult you just have to accept that. It just reminds me of an episode of The Simpsons where Homer becomes the football coach and he's going around with a clipboard telling people, Millhouse, you're cut. And he looks like he's enjoying it. And I'm not saying that's what's going on, and it might be that this coach is really pressed for time and it gets towards the end of the week and they're finding it really hard to make decisions on who's there and who's missing out, and they might be struggling to even deliver these messages and don't have a process in place to do it really well. And then it makes me wonder, should children's coaches be specialist children's coaches with a lot more knowledge about psychology and what the damages it can do?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I know kind of playing into my hands about my topic there, but I think the awareness of that's really important because in selection-based issues, I see that loads in like senior adult athletes, and often that comes from what's maybe happened when they were younger, what selection and non-selection means, how it was delivered. I think it's, potentially a coach doesn't realise that there would be any lasting impact or any impact at all from sending a text on a Friday night, for example. It might be worth, depending on what kind of relationship the person that's asked this question has with the team and with the coach, of actually just opening up about that and saying, I'm finding that he's, getting himself into a bit of a state. I say he. Do we know it's a he? Yes, we do. That he's getting himself into a state the night before and it's having an impact. And actually it might be that the coach can tailor something different. But I think in terms of the crux of the issue, I would want to probably get a bit more context, if possible, from the child about what's really anxiety provoking, what's most anxiety provoking about that. Is it the not knowing? Is it the I'm putting a lot of pressure on, I have to be selected, that sort of demanding language. And as a parent, appreciate you're not psychologists out there, and it's hard enough when you are a psychologist to tease out that information. But can you pick up on any language? Are they really demanding, I have to play, if I don't play I'm a failure, I have to do well. So that really rigid, like pressure-based language can give you a bit of a clue as to why maybe he's feeling as he is.
So all in all, a very complex question that there's lots of strands to there. From a footballing point of view, I think if you're having to text children that they're not selected at the weekend, perhaps your squad's too big and you should be trying to get everyone involved. I know it's a junior Premier League, but it's not the be-all and end-all to win these games, is it? And if, to have players on the fringes all the time and not selected, maybe your squads are a bit too big. And the kid's getting anxiety, he's not playing, which means he's not developing or getting experience, so he's not getting any better. It doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah, and if your squad is huge and you're having to do this, is there a duty of care to provide something extra? So find a decent local futsal club and come and there's 5 players left over, you can play some 5v5 on a Saturday, and just find an alternative where, those kids actually might go and really enjoy that day, and it's an opportunity that they wouldn't have got if the squad wasn't big, and you could turn it into a massive positive.
Yeah, well, lots of ideas there, but I think, like you say, sort of trying to find out exactly the root cause of the anxiety, and going from there. Well, good luck with that one. It's a real deep one, wasn't it, for our first 3 questions? Right, shall we move on to question number 4? My son was on trial at a pro club. Although he did very well, he wasn't offered a place at the academy. He goes on constantly about trying again with an academy, but after the experience he had, I am very apprehensive about ever letting him try again. Do you think 9 years old is too young to be thrust into such a high pressure environment? Unfortunately, whether we like it or not, that's the system, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the thing that jumps out at me with that question is into the high pressure environment. I think academy, especially we're talking about 9 years old, 10 years old, 11 years old, it shouldn't really be a high pressure environment. What is it that's making it a high pressure environment?
Mm-hmm.
I think
that's the key, isn't it?
Yeah, like how a coach is dealing with players at that age. It is unfortunately a bit of a it's the nature of the beast with pro academies and the setup of children in football that young.
Well, the children know they're either going to get accepted or not, so there's pressure there regardless. So parents can try and keep the pressure off. I know the academies are much better now at trying to make it more fun and less pressure, but the kids at the end of the day know, don't they? At the end of this, I'm either going to get accepted as a yes or no, and I suppose it's then how they handle that pressure that they've kind of put on themselves, I guess, and whether they feel like a failure afterwards if it doesn't work out. But parents can do a lot there, can't they, to take the pressure off them, that regardless of the outcome, they still love them, and there's still other opportunities, and it's just another part of your experience and development as a footballer, whatever the outcome.
Yeah, I think I worked recently with a young player who was released from a professional academy, and there was very much like an assumption of, I have to get back in somewhere else, otherwise I can't make it. It was, that it was clear as day in his mind that was the process. And I think there's so many players that either got released from academies and still ended up to have career. And we're talking about players here that go on to have careers, and that's not the reason why a lot of these listeners' children will play football.
No.
It isn't all about that anyway. But even if that's the primary aim or the primary focus, it's not just a linear process. You're in an academy at 9 and you go on to progress, and there's no other way. I've recently worked with a much older player, 20 years old, who wasn't scouted or picked up to go into an academy until that age, and is now in a Premier League academy, or a Premier League setup, I should say. So I think it's making that clear to the child as well, that even at 9, you might have been in that setup and now you're out. It's not all downhill from there.
No, and that experience, I presume it will be a 6-week trial, that experience can hold you in good stead later down the line at 15, 16, if the opportunity ever comes again. You've already had a crack at it once and hopefully learned things from it.
It is nice to see, though, that actually it sounds like the person asking this question isn't really keen on pushing the child back into an academy, which is something you do sometimes see. That if a child drops out of a system somewhere, that it's actually the parents trying to go, I've got to get him back in somewhere else, got to keep on it.
Yeah, well, they get quite used to and enjoy the status that comes with it, and I know a lot of them wouldn't like to hear that, but they do with their Facebook posts and their Instagram posts of, oh, we're travelling to play West Ham today and we're up against Arsenal and my lad scored against Man United, and it does happen, and then suddenly it's gone, and they get a bit addicted to that dopamine hit that they were getting, so like, we've got to get them back in somewhere, and, we need to do something. It's a bit of a minefield, isn't it, Geoff?
Yeah, I just wonder if Betsy might have any tips to stop parents falling into that trap. One thing I do is, if I think, oh, should I really be putting that on social media, is I just put it in my phone notes, and then I feel like I've done whatever it was I needed to do. I don't know if you've got any advice that would help a parent maybe stop before they jump on there and end up down this.
I think a stop and think process is always good. I mean, it's good with a lot of things, isn't it?
Yeah.
Stop before you act. Easier said than done. But I think just maybe asking a few key questions as the parent of, because most of this stuff is done in really good nature. They're proud of their children. They want to share successes and stories and all of that kind of thing. Maybe with a lack of awareness of, how does that get interpreted by the child, either in that moment or looking back of, mum and dad want to post about me and everyone's really proud of me and everyone is talking about me and I'm the friend at school that's in an academy, and I hear all these things sometimes. I think social media can be unhelpful with that, so I think a stop and think is probably actually your good advice, Geoff, which is good.
Yeah, hi, Geoff, where'd that come from?
Probably you at some
Oh
point.
yeah, probably me, yeah. Something I read somewhere, no doubt. Right, great question though, and again, another one we could probably do a whole podcast on, just on the pro game. But we've got a few to get through, so let's move on to question number 5, and again it's one that's directed to me. I enjoyed your quote about reframing your praise to include the backstory. Can you give me some examples? I did have the quote somewhere. I said, reframe all your praise to include the backstory. It's a game changer. And basically, it's about not just praising the outcome of something, but the process that it took. So an example might be if your child scores a goal with their weak foot, so say my lad would be his left foot, so rather than just well done, you scored a goal today, and giving him a fiver, like happens a lot, you could praise the backstory behind that. So it might say, well done son, you've practiced so hard recently on your weaker foot, you really deserve that. So you're just putting in a bit of a backstory about the process, and you can do it with sort of characteristics as well. So you could say something along the lines of, you could praise them for determination, so you got your rewards today for being really determined and resilient, and just throwing a little bit extra in there other than just praising the outcome of a goal or a win or any other sort of success. And you probably know a lot more about this than me, Betsy.
Yeah, I think it's really good. Spoken like a true psychologist, Pez.
I've read a bit.
But I think just to add on to that, you can also be really strategic about doing that with like failures as such. So if you see your own child has had a shot on goal and the keeper saved it, maybe it was spot on decision making. How can we commend the process even when a failing has happened? So, because we can get stuck in what I call like a bit of an incorrect feedback loop. When things go well, the outcome's good, so everything else must have been good. And when things haven't gone well, then, you know, things leading up to that must have not been good as well. But how many times can we identify situations that, you know, maybe it was a miss, maybe some kind of outcome didn't come off, but actually it was absolutely the right decision, or it's been something that's been worked on really hard in training sessions. So it's important to look at that as well in terms of things that haven't gone well too.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant point. I've seen that a lot where, you know, a child will try a eye of the needle pass and it doesn't quite work, and, you know, everyone will groan, and they think, I won't try that again because it got a groan and it was a failure. So you need to really praise the idea, and, you know, the idea behind the move. It's just the decision was great, just the execution wasn't quite right, and you can practice the execution, can't you?
There's also some situations where the execution might be fine, but the opposition, like we're playing an open sport here where there's other people that want to win. So if you're facing, it's quite difficult to think about in football, but it happens. If there's, you know, really strong defender in opposition that gets a great tackle in, you know, that can be demoralising depending on what's happened in the lead up, and it might be a case of, I'm not going to try that again, that didn't work. But actually maybe everything was completely right and the outcome wasn't there, but, you know, you've got someone else that also wants to win.
Yeah. Anything from you, Geoff?
No, it's just one of those things that it's quite a skill as a coach, isn't it, to pick those moments and how you phrase your feedback. And I think one that I've heard you say a lot is, I could see what you tried there, and that's almost a praise in itself, isn't it? You've recognised what they're trying.
Yeah, because ultimately the sport boils down to decision making. So you don't want to squash ideas and decisions that might be good later on, that they just might not have the strength in their legs for a 30-yard crossfield ball or something, but the idea was good. So you don't want to put it into their heads that was a bad idea. Let them know it was a good idea, we just haven't quite got the execution right yet.
I've got a question for Betsy. It is around this really. I think, Bez, you feel quite strongly that sometimes, how can I phrase this? A lot of places say, get as many different varied experiences as you can, have as many different coaches as you can. But sometimes if you're going to get coaches that are giving mixed messages and aren't doing this and thinking about it as deeply as you have, you might not always be so keen for players to go and experience lots of different coaches, isn't it? And this is probably going to link into a question that's coming later on, actually, when I skim read them over. So I don't know, what do you think about that, Betsy?
I think, I don't know whether I'm directly answering your question here, but as you were talking, I was thinking this is where actually parents can help and work with, particularly if they're aligned with the coach. You know, so they've got a coach like Pez who is going to pick up on, you know, I can see what you tried there and those kind of things, that's a super helpful comment to make. But parents can help in that reflective process of, you know, instead of just saying, you know, oh, you did well today because there was, you know, their son or daughter played well, or because the team won. It's actually trying to help your child to reflect. So that's a skill that, you know, I work with adults that don't do that too well. So don't you know, expect huge amounts, but starting to encourage your children to do that's really helpful, and to pick apart, you know, actually, and you might not phrase it as detailed as this, but how was your decision making today? You know, what did you try and do the right things, or what were your processes like, and how did that come off, so that there is a bit of a distinction between this is what actually happened that you might want to reflect on was good and bad, but let's look at about things in a bit more detail. About that, oh, you know, that shot that you missed, what was that like? Was your technique good? And almost get some of that reflection at home.
I think I wrote in the book about asking your child for 2 or 3 things that they felt they did well in a match or enjoyed in a match. And when they get to 13, like my boy, you're lucky to get any sort of communication from them, but it's not a bad idea. And then you just ask for one area that they think they might not have done so well at or could improve at, just to get the sort of conversation going. I think that was in more of a section of the parents who love to analyse the match on the way home in the car, because they tend to be all negative, picking out all the things that haven't gone well. So if you can start with, what do you think went well? What did you enjoy? And then, is it something like 3 positives to every negative you should aim for, or even more?
Yeah, I'm probably not as prescriptive as that. I think it's also, it can be helpful to just get 1 positive and then say, okay, and why?
Right. Okay.
So say for instance you ask your child, what went well today? Okay, well I dribbled well today. Okay, well what helped you to do that today? And maybe you then get a bit of information. Oh, I practiced that a lot in the past couple of weeks, and then you can reward that. And what didn't go so well? Oh, my first touch wasn't very good. Okay, well why? What might have led to that? Oh, I wasn't really concentrating, or I didn't eat my Weetabix, or whatever it is, and you get a bit of a deeper layer. So I wouldn't worry too much about trying to get it really right as a parent. I've got to ask 3 good things.
Yeah.
I've got to only get 1. And your child might bring more than 1 negative, or want to start with negative. And I don't think there's always a right or wrong with that. Let them have that space to reflect, but try and help them to frame some positives.
I guess it's trying to get the positives, and then with any negative finding a controllable element to it. So something, if it is a first touch was poor today, well, how do you think you can go away and improve that for next time, and get them to come up with some positive answers, controllable answers for improvement.
Why is a very powerful question, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Isn't there a book? The Power of Why or something?
Why, yeah.
Cool, right. Cool. I'd like to say we're flying through them, but... Oof. Question number 6. Ready?
Ready.
Is the rise of so-called academy teams killing off grassroots football? Geoffrey.
Do you want to clarify what so-called?
Yeah, I know this one came in this week. I won't name him, James, but so-called academy. I think this is obviously to do with a lot of sort of business side setting up and calling themselves academies, or giving off that vibe that they're a level above grassroots football, where in fact they're all really grassroots teams, aren't they? It's just sort of branded in different ways. The question, are there so-called academy teams killing off grassroots football? I think it's far more serious than it needs to be, with all of these sort of elite teams popping up all over the place. And I do think it's probably decreased the standard, especially locally. The reason being is I think that with a certain amount of players all trying to get into these elite teams, or as he said, so-called academy teams, there's now an emphasis for these teams to win games to attract these players, because there's not a massive pool of players, is there, Geoff? So if the focus is always on winning games to attract players, then the focus naturally shifts by default away from development, because you can be developing kids, but if you're losing 5 or 6-0 every week, then a parent will move their kids out to the other academy team, because let's have it right, a lot of these academy teams charge sort of £70 to £100 a month to be there. So if your team's getting beaten, then parents are naturally going to take their kids to a different place because they're spending all this money. And a lot of parents can only judge development by how the team's doing and how their kids playing and whether they're winning and whether their kids scoring. It's going to be as black and white as that. So as soon as the emphasis goes on to recruitment and results, development suffers, which I think has led to a decrease in the standard locally of players. But I might be wrong, Geoff. I don't know what you think.
I don't get out and see that much grassroots football these days, so I couldn't comment about the standard. But
maybe not the standard of team, because a lot of these teams are quite well drilled and they know how to win games and get the best out of what they've got. So it's very, it's like a mini version of adult football. You know, we've got a big striker, we've got a quick winger, and we'll play to their strengths and we'll try and win and get teams turned, or we'll play to the big man. It's very like adult. So I think the standard of individual players has dropped that I've seen.
Right, and personally, I don't think you're going to create the environments for those individuals if this sounds like a business model to me, and very almost Americanized and about making money and getting as many children in as possible.
It's like the Little League in baseball, isn't it?
Yes, that's a good
Everyone
example.
wants to be in it, but with the Little League, I think it's something like only 54 players have ever gone from Little League to Big League, something like that, to Major League Basketball in all the years it's been going. So
And the rest have been focusing on their individual skills and having fun whilst doing it, I expect.
You know, not an expert in that,
No,
but it was just a
neither.
stat I saw the other day on baseball, which reminded me of this a little bit. I don't know if you've got anything to add on that, Betsy?
I'm probably not best placed because I would only really have had experiences in sort of professional club academy teams. But I have worked with a few players who have been involved in so-called academy teams. And yeah, it doesn't always bode well that you've got that almost dressing up as elite. And what you said there, Pez, actually I wouldn't know in terms of seeing it, but that sort of adult style, and probably moving away, trying to be like the elite performance team rather than development.
Yeah.
And actually just looking at performance in the moment is probably not very helpful for a younger player. Yeah.
But sadly, that's happened by default. Because like I say, there's only a certain amount of children that play football, and only a certain amount of the standard that these teams want. So they're all fighting over the same few players. And it's given power to the parents, really, to then, well, if my kid's not playing or we're losing games, I'll just take him to the next elite one next door. To try and win games, and you get a lot of parents take their children round all these to try them all, looking for something that, I don't know, maybe not there, but it must be a minefield for these parents when these teams are branded so well, and they all talk about development, but everybody kind of knows if they're bottom of the league or losing every week, then players are going to leave.
And that's when they're actually going to start focusing on development, isn't it? Because they'll be left with the players that really have to develop. That's the crux of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, again, another very difficult question to answer. Again, we probably need a whole podcast on elite leagues and things like that, and grassroots football. Grassroots football special. How about that?
Sounds good to me, Pez.
All right, good. I'll organise that. Cheers, Geoff. You're invited. Right, question number 7. Is the pressure at a young age leading to kids burning out sooner, which is putting them off the game and adding to the demise of the local amateur game?
You're looking at me, but
I am looking at
probably
you.
be good if
Well, the
Betsy-
word pressure
The word pressure
is good,
handed
because
back
then we
over
can
to
back
me.
that over
Pressure-
to Betsy, can't we?
pressure and burnout.
Pressure and burnout.
Oh yeah, that's definitely psych language, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it probably links to some of the stuff we've said already in terms of that perception of like being in an academy and things like that, how that pressure looks. Do players burn out early? You get child involved, even in pre-academy age. I think there is something in this for me. It's like, imagine you start work from 10. You're going to be pretty bored with work and the monotony that comes with going to repeat the same things, earn a living. You're not necessarily doing that for enjoyment, etc., etc. I think you can apply similar principles to young players that particularly go into sort of academy setups, that maybe that enjoyment isn't there and there is a lot of pressure, and then they sustain that for 9 years. They're only 18 years of age at that point, and what have they been through in those 9 years? Has it been quite intense? Has it been mentally challenging, physically challenging, less enjoyable. So there is, I'm not saying that's the same for everyone's journey, but I think there is some caution to be had there. Piling a lot of pressure externally from parents sometimes, pressure from clubs, academies, but also pressure from, the young child to
Mm-hmm.
I'm in an academy, I'm wearing the gear, I'm training at the training ground, I just want to go on and be a footballer, for example, is, I think, always going to lead to a degree of burnout.
Yeah, so in the professional environment that you're talking about, the pressure must be massive. I don't think, unless you've been a child in that environment, you really necessarily can understand. I mean, all the games are filmed and everything, and then sat down, you have to watch your games back, analyse them. Must be incredible. You just don't want to make a mistake.
I think some of that's handled really well. Ironically, and this might be interesting, some of the better equipped younger children that I've seen in academies are those with parents who are either ex-professionals or potentially still playing.
Okay, that's interesting.
So I think there's something in that, in terms of those parents knowing, this. I think it sounds a bit flippant, but if you have a child in an academy, like, there's not really anything in that. That's great, and you can celebrate that to a point, but it doesn't actually mean anything. It doesn't mean they're going to be a footballer. It doesn't mean they're in the top, 100 young children in the country. It doesn't actually really tangibly mean a great deal. It's just that's the situation they're in. They've maybe earned a spot through being picked up or whatever, and enjoy that and try and strive and whatever they're wanting to achieve out of that. But I think, I've seen high level professionals have children in academies from the age of 9 to 18, and actually they handle it very well. So whether there's an awareness from the parent and player side of things that nothing's taken for granted, this doesn't mean anything, and actually I know how damaging this could potentially be.
I see a lot of pressure with the academy lads actually, from their friends, because their friends still play for a grassroots team, and they might be doing really well or making new friends, and end of season tours and end of season presentations and all these things that they kind of miss out on. And I've seen a lot of players want to leave pro academies, they just want to go and play with their friends for a bit, which again is another sort of pressure.
Just when Betsy was talking then, there's a brilliant photo of Messi and Suarez at Barcelona's training ground where both their kids are playing in the same team. They both got their shorts and t-shirt on and flip-flops with their feet up, just having a chat and not really even paying attention, I don't think, to the game that's going on. And is that the picture at all academies up and down the country with parents? I don't know. Yeah,
I don't think so, no. But pressure can come from all sorts of different angles. It was James that sent this one in again, so I think he's actually referring to more grassroots pressure, or the pressure of getting into the so-called academies, because he sent both questions in together, so it might be slightly different what he's looking for. But I'm going to throw one in there. This a burnout. I think some parents burn out too soon. So they have a child who's doing okay, and their Facebook and Instagram's full of every week scored this amount of goals, doing really well, and it's all nicey and they're all getting medals and things like that. And they get to the kid gets about 13 and 14, I think the parents are sometimes burnt out. There's nothing left for them to say anymore. There's no wonderful posts anymore. All the children sort of found their levels, and not everyone's winning everything. And they lose a bit of interest, which I've seen quite a lot as well, which is a shame.
That can actually be a sign of the parents getting a bit, going back to question 2 about intrinsic and extrinsic motivators and motivation, how parents can sometimes get sucked into that.
Yeah.
Actually, they're externally motivated by their child's success, and less about what they see in their child's enjoyment, and actually how much enjoyment they get from seeing their child play, for example. Maybe their focus shifts onto, I want my child to succeed. I want them to be doing the best they can do. I feel frustrated when they don't play well. Maybe if you recognise any of those kind of things in yourself, maybe that's a bit of a warning sign of maybe you're almost flipping over to that extrinsic. You're motivated through the success of your child, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And you see, if you go and watch an under 7s game up to about under 11s, everyone's all excited. There's, everyone's watching. It's all packed out, isn't it, down one side of the pitch. And then you go and watch an under 14s, under 15s, under 16s. There's hardly anyone there watching. It's like the parents aren't bothered anymore because they've realised that actually this is their level. It's not going to end up in pro academy level or anything like that, and sort of their extrinsic motivators disappear. So do they.
From experience, that's about the point where I get approached by a parent to say, all my child ever talks about is playing for a professional football club. What have we got to do? Like, as if I can just go, right, go away and do this, this and this, and they'll be in a professional football club.
Yeah.
And I just wondered what Betsy's thoughts are on where that's coming from, because I do think the child is probably at home talking about it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But originally, where that motivation's coming from, what are your thoughts on it, and what's a good answer to a parent that asks that question?
I think this might sound a bit brutal, but I think ultimately it's not a profession you can just choose to go into. You can't just say, I think what I want to do is be a professional footballer, so I'll do everything that I can, and I can get there somehow. Like, it just isn't like that. So it has to come from a place of, like, they enjoy playing football. I've had parent inquiries. Can you work with my son? Can you work with my daughter? Because I don't really think they're enjoying the sport anymore. So the parent wants to push them back into enjoying it, and that's a bit of a dodgy ground. I think. Go back to your original question, Geoff, because I sort of sidetracked myself there.
So the point where the parent burnout is starting to kick in for most of the parents, and then you've got one or two that are left that seem very desperate for their child to realise their dreams, and they ask, what have they got to do, because all they talk about is playing for a professional club.
Yeah, I think...
What's an answer to that parent?
I think you've almost got to persuade the parent to control the controllables or allow their child to.
And maybe reframe the question that is, can they get to the highest level that's their potential, and maybe not.
Yeah.
So it's your question, they ask you, or they tell you, my child keeps going on about
all
it.
they talk about is playing for a professional club. I've had several times in the past 2 or 3 years actually that parents have approached me. Have you got a minute? I've just got this question that's
I've had 2 recently
waiting to ask you,
where they've actually said, so and so, my child, has decided that they want to be a professional, and how can I help? And like, oh goodness gracious! So it's complicated. Again, I've taken you off the question there.
I'm never going to remember, am I? No. I think a bit of reframing is helpful to, I guess, maybe a bit of a sense check and go, okay, well, they can only do all they can. So in terms of being, it depends what position the child's in. If they're maybe 15, 16, and they are playing somewhere where, there are scouts around and things like that, are they visible? There's some probably pragmatic things you can point a parent to, where's your child playing at the moment, and, can they be seen? And more then, I guess, what are they working on? Are they enjoying it? Where are they playing? Are they playing regularly? Are they consistent with their behaviours? It's not a straightforward question, is it?
No, it's very in-depth and complicated, isn't it?
I think in terms of burnout, sorry to interrupt you, Pez.
That's all right.
In player and parent, there might be something in this for another podcast, because there's a lot of stuff. I've done a lot of stuff recently on like psychological recovery. So how you can encourage your child to almost recover, not just physically, but how can you encourage them to kind of digest and process again, move on, so it doesn't ruin their weekend, or it doesn't ruin your weekend, or if you're the parent that's maybe feeling like you're going to get a bit burnt out, how are you actually processing and moving on from games and things like that? So there's another topic there.
That'll be very interesting. I have a section of that in the book as well. Perhaps you should read my book, tear it to pieces, and I'll rewrite it. Right, I think we should probably move on with that one, because we've only done 7. This one I'm hoping is going to be slightly easier, because I've already got the answer for it. So number 8, when the boys get older and squad sizes increase, i.e. moving from 9-a-side to 11-a-side at under 13s, do academies also increase their squad numbers, or will they already have the players they need for 11-a-side? I guess what I'm asking is, do they have a recruitment drive and scout new players for the bigger squads? And that came in from Richie. So I wasn't sure about this, so I spoke to my friend James Baxter. I don't know if you know James Baxter.
I know James Baxter very well.
Yeah, he was at Brighton at the same time as you, wasn't he?
Yes.
So James used to work with me at Southampton Football Club many years ago, and then he was at Brighton. I think he went to Portsmouth for a while, I'm not sure. But he's now an agent with CAA-based agency. So I said, if you want this, I'll give your agency a little name drop. So there we are. And he's said, most academies, especially Category 1 clubs, will carry enough numbers in the foundation phase to field 2 times 7v7 or 9v9 squads. So therefore, when you get to the youth development phase and 11v11, they already have the numbers. So you can read that either way, that no, there's not a recruitment drive, or I like to think there's probably always a massive recruitment drive all the way through and it never stops. But it seems to be steady and doesn't change. He also added, another factor is the recruitment restrictions open up when the players enter the youth development phase from an hour to an hour and a half. So that's the travelling distance. This allows clubs to recruit further afield and have more selections from grassroots and purchases from other academies. So you can be an under 8, get to the next phase when it goes 11v11, and suddenly you're competing with children that are an hour and a half away coming in to get your place. So it's, again, quite a pressure environment. But to answer the question, no, there doesn't appear to be a specific extra recruitment drive as the size of the aside, if you like, to 11 aside increases. I don't know if anyone's got anything they want to add to that.
I don't, but it was a good question. It's well answered by James.
It was a good question. Thank you, James. Great. That's the simplest one yet. Perhaps we should outsource all these questions. Number 9. My daughter has been playing football with you at Pezzers for some time now. I presume that's me. She absolutely loves it and now feels she's ready to join a team. Do you recommend a girls only team or a mixed one? And again, this could probably go a little bit more in depth with. For me, I've always said, and I don't know whether I should, but I quite like the girls to play in boys' teams for as long as they possibly can. And it's changing now, but when we first started getting girls getting involved, there wasn't a bigger pool of girls to choose from. So when you got 7 or 8 together to form a team, they weren't of a particularly great standard. And so if the girls can play in a boys' team for as long as possible, it can help with their development. But now it is changing slightly because there's a lot more girls playing football, which is great, and the standard's getting much better. So it's a really difficult one to answer. What do you think, Geoff?
Well, it's a cliche, but every journey will be different, won't it? So if your daughter comes to you and say, right, I'd like to play for an all-girls team, that's the right time for them to go and play for an all-girls team, isn't it? But like you said, if they can do both and carry on with if they're originally in a mixed team, then great, because they're keeping friendships going, keeping developing, and doing all the things that they were already doing.
Yeah, I suppose you have to take each one on its own merit, don't you? And maybe try it. Trying them both. I mean, we had Casey, didn't we, in my team? He was the only girl and was absolutely brilliant. And loved having her in the team. And then she did eventually end up in a girls only team, and they've done absolutely amazing at Andover New Street.
Yeah.
So she's had both ways and really enjoyed it. And you have to think of things about the friendships, and you know, I know Casey's team do a lot of extra stuff outside of the actual football. So I think you really need to have a look at what's available and judge them on their own merit. I think the question's specifically directed at which is going to help my daughter be a better player. But again, it's pretty difficult to answer, isn't it? I don't know if you've got any thoughts on it at all, Betsy.
I think probably the only thing I'd throw in there is, you know, what are your daughter's feelings? Like if it's going to be a reluctance maybe to carry on playing in a mixed team, then like consider that in terms of like what conditions are good for her to thrive in. Has she got a preference, because that might have an impact on the longevity of what comes next. So just a consideration for that.
I think with it is because obviously I know the girl, because I've coached her and she's actually very, very good. And I think the question's more because they're worried that if they make a wrong decision, it could hold her back with her development, because she's doing really, really well. But without knowing the specific teams and stuff, it's very difficult because there's some really good girls teams out there now, aren't there? Yeah. So try and find both, and have a little look and see what she wants to do, as Betsy said, and is most comfortable with.
And again, I'm going to say, see if there's any girls only futsal out there, because I think that would be the best environment, and also the FA National Futsal Series have done a brilliant job where everything is literally equal. The women's tier 1 plays on a Saturday, exactly the same live streams, exactly the same BT Sport as the men's that follows on a Sunday, and it's all exactly the same setup, just one day before. And there's some great opportunities for women's and girls to get involved. And now would be probably the best time to do it.
Women's sport's flying, isn't it, at the moment? Watching the Katie Taylor fight the other night and stuff as well, and the boxing. It's really, really good time.
It is. I'm working with a women's professional cricket team.
Oh, are you?
And it's great to see how women's cricket is really coming on.
Yeah, I'd heard that was like an upcoming sport.
Yeah, there's a
lot
of investment from the ECB going into women's cricket, and obviously the 100's been great as well in terms of getting sort of an exciting format out there as well for people to enjoy.
It's like some sort of barrier's been broken through now, and basically all they need is someone to back it a little bit and throw some investment at any of these sports, and they'll succeed now that a few people have managed to break this barrier down. It's
culturally, it feels like people are doing rather than just saying now, doesn't it? Not just talking about it. It feels like there's been a real movement. It's great.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Right, question number 10, and this will probably be the last one then, as we've just gone over the hour mark. So, question 10. If a parent doesn't know how to find the right environment for their child, or where the right place is, and what that looks like, how can a parent help themselves and their children to make good choices on clubs, coaches and teams? Wow, that is quite in-depth, isn't it? How can we help parents help themselves and their children to make good choices on clubs, coaches and teams?
I've got a bit of a controversial comment on this.
Go on.
Potentially.
Because I'm scrambling here. I've written a few notes, but...
So when I read that, I think, and I know I'm coming at this probably from more of a professional academy situation, but so many players, particularly probably that professional development phase, so that sort of 17s through to sort of B team, you will find yourself at some point in a situation where you do not like your coach, or you do not enjoy something about that environment, and you have to find a way to adapt to that. So I think, if I'm being controversial, you can make choices within reason, I guess, on what teams you play for, what coaches you surround yourself with, and what teams you're playing for. But actually, it's a really good test sometimes to be involved in a team where there are challenges, and I know that probably isn't...
Well, I think at some point, if you're on that journey, like you say, you're going to find yourself inevitably in that situation. So if you've had a bit of practice with dealing with adversity and things that you know you're not quite happy with, then it's going to hold you in good stead, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a quote I always come back to, or sort of an insight quote, whatever you want to call it, that when you think you're dealing with a difficult person or a difficult situation, it tells you much more about yourself than it does about the personal situation. You know, why is it a struggle for you? So, say for example, I work with a player who is very, very quiet, or not very emotional, and doesn't express a lot. I would struggle with that, but that's because I want disclosure and emotion, and I want to see what that person's feeling and going through. So it often tells you a lot more about your own tolerances, if that makes sense.
Very interesting. I think this one's probably been written by a confused parent that just wants what's best for their child, but they don't really know quite what that looks like. That's how I've read it.
Yeah.
Now, because there's so many options out there with, I don't want to say it again, but the so-called elite teams, and there's loads of grassroots teams, and people saying different things, and there's some in different leagues, and there's some that are winning things, some that are not, some that say they're about development, some that are all over social media winning everything and playing in supposed top leagues, and
it's going to be a question that we're going to get till the end of time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it is a real minefield to find it. And I'm really glad Betsy said what you said, because I almost feel like culturally we're coming away from, like, if I wanted to do a club, or if I wanted to do something, I start at the beginning and finish the season. My parents wouldn't let me dip out if I didn't enjoy it today because somebody said something about the way I look, or something. They'd make you stick it out to the end. And I don't know if there's a little bit of that in there as well as what you described. That
wanting that perfection in the situation. Like, how do I find exactly the right place for my child? That's not real life. No, and I think as well, there's probably a situation here where you guys will know much more about this than I will, of there's so much choice that you almost get that like paralysis of I don't know what to do.
It's a Netflix thing again, isn't it?
That's it. Yeah.
You spend an hour trying to find something to watch and then sack it off.
You waste so much time trying to seek what the right answer is. So I think so my partner uses a phrase with me sometimes, which is really infuriating at times, but like there's no wrong decision. Yeah. So in some situations there's no wrong decision. It's just better to decide. And actually, I'm going to come full circle and talk about that from a performance point of view as well. There's so many times when I'll use like a traffic light analogy with players or athletes in various sports, where if they're a bit crippled by decision making, how can you go from, when you're on red, you're stopped, you're soaking in all the information you can, whatever that looks like in your sport. On amber, you're in that sort of active decision making, right? What's going on right now and what am I going to do? And then when you're on green, you're going. There's no delay at the traffic lights. You don't mull it over for 5 seconds when you're actually driving a car. You're going and you're committing to the decision that you've made. And although that's not directly relatable in here, I think there's something in that when we feel a bit conflicted with lots of different decisions, lots of different choices.
Yeah, just know that each one's going to throw up, whichever place you take is going to throw up their own challenges, and then you deal with those challenges as and when they arise as part of their development. There won't be one place which is perfect for everybody. I've written a few obvious things down, like, it's got to be fun and safe, and I always like places where there's good friendship groups. I like teams that go on end of season tours and have barbecues and do a lot of fun stuff for the kids, because actually when they all get to be adults, that's the things they remember and they look back on, and then should want that for their kids. No pressure, and somewhere where they're going to improve.
All those things only happen if everyone buys into and fully commits again, don't they? So it might be about finding the right group. It might not even be about the environment so much, was it? If you've got the right group of people, then they're all buying into it, then all those things are probably going to follow because people make it happen. And it's the extra stuff that goes on outside of the club that makes you a club, doesn't it? In my opinion.
The end of season tours that I've been part of, those are the things that I cherish the most and look back on the most. That's as an adult. And, bump into some of the kids now and that's all they talk about. Remember when we went to Barcelona and Lisbon and played on Benfica's pitch and all these little extra things. Really hard work to organise, but absolutely well worth it.
Going back to the question, none of those parents would have known that was coming down the line, so how would they have made the right choices? It's an impossible question to answer, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think don't be sucked into trying them all. Just go around every single one, and your kids have more clubs than Tiger Woods by the time they're 10 or 11, because you're looking for that perfect place, or for that one coach that says your child's amazing and I can really see something in your child and I can help them be a pro, and that type of thing.
That would be my red flag, by the way. That's I think why I like you so much, Pez, is there's a lot of people out there that will say what people want to hear, because they'd like that child to come and play for their team, and I think you'll say what they need to hear.
Not so
Whether they like it,
Yeah,
they like it or
try.
not, whether it's the answer that they're chasing around to hear, or it's not, you'll tell them exactly what you think is the right thing to do, and you always have done.
Thank you, Geoff.
That's right, mate.
Maybe leave it there. As I've said many times, football's not that important, but children are, and that should be the bottom line of everything.
It's like Pez's final thought, that.
Yeah.
It was, wasn't it?
Nice
Maybe that
message.
should be a...
Like
Nice
that.
message.
Well, guys, thank you for coming back and kick-starting off Series 2 of the In the Huddle podcast. Hope you've enjoyed it.
I almost had a good time with your pets.
Almost had a good time. Betsy, thank you very much, and we'll be seeing a lot more of you, and hopefully between the three of us we can keep this going and add a lot of value locally and even further afield.
Yeah, lovely to be back. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. See you again. Bye.